We're diving deep today into some pretty weighty topics.
Oh, yeah.
Things like religious freedom, bumping up against LGBTQ plus rights. Individual freedoms versus societal norms, the stuff that keeps you up at night, wondering if there's any way to make it all work.
It's definitely a complex landscape, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And you're right, the tension is real.
Yeah?
How do we balance individual expression with the need for a cohesive society, especially when everyone seems to have such different ideas about what's right and wrong?
Exactly. And that's what we're going to try to untangle today, using a lens I find fascinating, the Baha'i faith.
Okay.
Now, before you think this is getting all preachy,
Right.
it's not about converting anyone. It's about using their unique perspective on justice, unity, and something called consultation to see if maybe they've got some practical insights we can all use.
I think what's intriguing about the Baha'i approach is that they don't shy away from the conflicts.
Yeah.
They acknowledge that different values do clash in the real world.
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Even just in the source material you sent, there were examples of religious groups wanting exemptions from laws that others see as fundamental LGBTQ plus folks demanding equal rights that some see as infringing on their beliefs and cultural practices that clash head-on with what's considered acceptable.
Right.
It's like, how can any government possibly juggle all that?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yep.
How do you create a society that's inclusive without sacrificing fairness and justice for everyone?
Right.
Can individual rights coexist with the need for social harmony?
Okay, so where do we even begin to unpack this Gordian knot?
Well, one of the core principles of the Baha'i faith is the concept of the oneness of humanity. But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
They're not talking about some bland uniformity where everyone thinks and acts the same.
Okay, so not some Borg collective where individuality gets assimilated.
Definitely not.
Okay.
Think of it more like an ecosystem.
Okay.
You've got incredible diversity, plants, animals, fungi, all these different organisms with their own roles to play, but they're all interconnected, relying on each other for survival.
Right.
That's the kind of unity they're talking about.
So interconnectedness, not sameness. I can get behind that.
Yeah.
But doesn't that make the decision-making process even harder? How do you make choices that benefit such a diverse group?
That's where the Baha'i concept of justice comes into play, and it's more nuanced than you might think.
Okay.
They don't see it as a simple either-or between individual rights and the common good.
Okay, unpack that for me. How do they balance those two?
Imagine it like a scale with two pans on one side. You have the individual's right to freedom to express themselves, to pursue their own path.
Right.
But on the other side is the well-being of the whole community, the need for stability and order. Baha'i justice is about finding the equilibrium point where both sides are considered, not just tipping the scales in one direction or the other.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where individual freedom doesn't trample on the rights of others or disrupt the social fabric.
Precisely. And to guide that balancing act, the Baha'i teachings offer some pretty concrete principles. One is that laws have to be universal.
No?
No special treatment for any group. Everyone plays by the same rules.
Right.
Then there's this idea that rights come with responsibilities.
Okay.
You can't just demand your own freedom without considering its impact on others or the overall harmony of society.
That's a good point. It can't just be a free-for-all, right?
Right. And this leads to a key concept, consultation.
Okay.
It's about actively seeking out different viewpoints, genuinely trying to understand where others are coming from and working collaboratively to find solutions that uplift everyone involved.
So not just digging in our heels and arguing, but actually trying to build bridges.
Exactly.
Talk.
And this applies to everything from those big thorny issues like marriage equality and gender identity to everyday conflicts in our neighborhoods. It's about fostering a spirit of unity, recognizing our interconnectedness, and having the humility to say, hey, I may not have all the answers, let's talk.
That makes a lot of sense, but we haven't even touched on one of the biggest elephants in the room, religion itself.
Okay.
So much of the conflict we see stems from differing religious beliefs, right? How does the Baha'i faith navigate that minefield, especially with secularism on the rise?
That's a great question, and this is where we start to see some truly unique aspects of their worldview. First and foremost, they believe in a clear separation of church and state.
Okay, so no theocracies, got it, but how does that work in practice?
Well, the idea is that while spiritual principles should definitely inform our sense of justice and how we govern, no one group's religious beliefs should ever be imposed on others. This ensures everyone feels included regardless of their faith or lack thereof.
That sounds pretty radical, especially given how intertwined religion and politics are in so many parts of the world.
It is a different approach, and it's not just about keeping religion out of politics. They also place a strong emphasis on respecting religious freedom for everyone.
So freedom of religion, but within reasonable boundaries, I'm guessing.
Exactly. There's a great quote from Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, that sums up this principle beautifully. He said, "Consort with the followers of all religions in a spirit of friendliness and fellowship."
I like that it reminds us that even with our differences, we're all part of the same human family.
Precisely. And that leads to their third key point.
Okay.
Focusing on common ethical foundations.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that look like?
It's about shifting the focus away from those theological debates that tend to divide us. Instead, they emphasize the shared values that unite us. Things like honesty, compassion, service to others, the pursuit of truth.
Right.
These are the things that transcend specific doctrines and can be a rallying point for people of all backgrounds.
It's like finding that universal language of the heart, the shared humanity that connects us beyond all the labels and ideologies.
Exactly, and the Baha'i faith really tries to walk that talk. They see these shared values as the building blocks for a more unified and just world.
This is all incredibly thought-provoking, but I have to ask, what about LGBTQ plus rights and gender identity?
Yeah.
It feels like that's where things get especially heated, right?
You're right. Those are often the flashpoints in these debates. And while the Baha'i faith does have specific teachings about human behavior, what's crucial here is their unwavering focus on the dignity and worth of every single person.
So even with differing views, everyone deserves to be treated with respect.
Absolutely. And their teachings are crystal clear on this. Prejudice and discrimination in any form are totally unacceptable, period.
It's refreshing to hear, especially in the context of such charged conversations. Yeah. So how do they suggest we actually approach these sensitive topics?
Well, instead of dictating a rigid set of rules or taking a stance on every single issue, they emphasize two things: open, respectful dialogue and creating environments where everyone feels valued and heard.
Okay, so more of that consultation and unity we were talking about, those themes seem to be popping up a lot.
They do, and for good reason.
Yeah.
The goal is to create a society where everyone feels loved and respected regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity, and that takes honest conversation, deep listening, and a willingness to step outside our own echo chambers.
It sounds like this approach recognizes that social progress isn't always a straight line, that we have to be willing to meet people where they are and walk alongside them.
You're right. The Baha'i writings talk about a long-term vision where societies gradually align their material progress with spiritual principles. It's a journey, not a destination, and it requires patience, open hearts, and a lot of learning along the way.
We've covered a lot of ground: individual rights, social well-being, religions, place in society. But let's zoom out for a second.
Okay.
How does the Baha'i faith view the whole idea of governing a diverse society?
That's a great question, and this is where we get a glimpse into their administrative model, which they believe puts these principles into action.
All right, I'm all ears. Fill me in.
Well, at its core, it's a system built on consultation. Decisions aren't made top-down by a select few. Instead, there's a real effort to get input from diverse groups, foster understanding, and strive for consensus whenever possible.
That sounds pretty democratic. But isn't consensus building incredibly difficult, especially in a society as diverse as ours?
It's definitely a challenge, but here's what's unique about their approach. They have a system of elected councils at local, national, and international levels. These councils are responsible for guiding the affairs of the community, and they operate on the principle of consultation, striving to make decisions that reflect the collective will and wisdom of the community.
So it's like a representative democracy, but with this built-in emphasis on consultation.
Exactly. And what's interesting is they also warn against going to extremes in either direction. No authoritarianism where one person or group calls all the shots, but also no excessive individualism where everyone's just out for themselves and no one considers the needs of the whole.
So finding that balance again between individual agency and the well-being of the collective.
Precisely. And their ultimate vision is even grander than that. They talk about global unity, about transcending national borders to face the challenges of the 21st century, together united in our diversity.
Wow. Talk about aiming high, but it is a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've explored these complex social issues through the lens of the Baha'i faith, and we've seen how their principles of justice, unity, and consultation offer a roadmap for navigating those tricky waters.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how do we actually put all this into actions? One thing to talk about high ideals, but how do we translate that into real-world change?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And luckily, the Baha'i teachings are full of practical suggestions. They emphasize that Real change starts at the grassroots level, with individuals making conscious choices to embody these principles in their daily lives.
Okay, I'm ready for some concrete steps. Where do we begin?
Well, a great starting point is education and awareness.
Okay.
We need to move beyond just teaching facts and figures. It's about fostering empathy, critical thinking skills, and a deep respect for diversity in all its forms.
So not just teaching tolerance, but actual understanding and appreciation for those who are different from us.
Exactly. And this starts young. We need to develop curricula that highlight the shared values and principles that unite us across religions, cultures, and identities, instead of focusing on what divides us. Let's celebrate our common humanity.
I love that it's like we're all part of this grand tapestry, each thread adding its own unique beauty to the overall design.
Beautifully put, and beyond education, there's a huge role for community building activities.
Like what? Give me some concrete examples.
Well, think about interfaith dialogues, where people from different religious backgrounds come together to learn from each other and discover common ground, or service projects where people from all walks of life team up to address local needs, or even workshops on consultation where people can practice those skills of listening, collaborating, and finding solutions that work for everyone.
Those are all great ideas. I can already see how those kinds of activities could build bridges and break down barriers between people.
Exactly. And finally, we can't forget the role of institutions. Governments and other organizations need to adopt consultative and inclusive approaches to policymaking. They need to prioritize the long-term well-being of society over short-term political gains.
Okay, so we need to be advocating for policies that reflect these values of justice, unity, and consultation. That makes a lot of sense.
It does, and it's not just about top-down change. It's also about individuals stepping up, being proactive in their communities, and promoting these values in their own spheres of influence.
So it's a both-and situation.
Exactly. We need both individual action and systemic change to create a society that truly reflects these beautiful principles.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. We've delved into the complex world of social challenges, exploring everything from religious pluralism to LGBTQ+ rights and gender identity, all through the lens of the Baha'i faith. And it's been fascinating to see how their principles of justice, unity, and consultation offer a practical and hopeful roadmap for navigating these tricky waters.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on how these ideas might be applied to the specific challenges of governing in a diverse society?
That's a great question, and it brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of the Baha'i approach, its vision of governance rooted in the oneness of humanity and the principles of justice and consultation. It's a model that seeks to create a society where every voice is heard and decisions are made for the benefit of all.
Okay, let's dive into that a little deeper.
Yeah.
How does this vision translate into practical governance structures? What might a society based on these principles actually look like?
Well, imagine a system where leaders are chosen not based on their popularity or personal ambition, but for their proven wisdom, integrity, and their genuine commitment to serving the common good.
So it's kind of like the concept of servant leadership.
That's a great comparison, and these leaders would be deeply guided by a sense of justice, ensuring that laws and policies are applied fairly to all, regardless of their background or beliefs. They'd always prioritize the well-being of the whole society, understanding that true progress only happens when everyone has the chance to thrive.
Okay, so far so good. But how would decisions actually be made in this system? It can't just be leaders meditating on what's best for everyone, right?
You're right. It's not about benevolent dictators. This is where the principle of consultation becomes absolutely essential.
Okay.
Instead of imposing decisions from the top down, this model emphasizes a process of inclusive deliberation where everyone impacted by a decision has a chance to share their perspective and contribute to finding solutions.
So it's kind of like crowdsourcing wisdom from the community, but isn't that incredibly messy and inefficient?
It can be, and that's why the Baha'i teachings provide guidelines for effective consultation. It's not just about gathering opinions, it's about creating a space for respectful dialogue where people can truly listen to each other, challenge assumptions, and work together to find solutions that benefit everyone involved.
I'm starting to see how this approach could lead to more just and equitable outcomes, even on those really divisive issues. But wouldn't there be a risk of certain groups or individuals dominating the conversation? How do you make sure everyone's voice is truly heard?
That's a really important point, and it's why the Baha'i teachings place so much emphasis on developing specific skills and attitudes that are crucial for effective consultation, for instance. They stress the importance of active listening, where you genuinely strive to understand the perspectives of others, even if you don't agree with them.
So it's not just about waiting for your turn to speak, but really trying to step into the other person's shoes and see the world through their eyes.
Exactly. And it also involves learning how to express your own views with clarity and respect, avoiding personal attacks or inflammatory language. The goal is to create a space where everyone feels safe to share their thoughts and ideas, even if they're different from the prevailing opinion.
It sounds like creating that kind of space requires a lot of intentionality and effort, especially in today's world, where polarization and negativity often dominate public discourse.
It's definitely a challenge, but at its core, the Baha'i teachings are profoundly optimistic about human nature. They believe we have the capacity to overcome these divisive tendencies and work together constructively, even on the most complex and challenging issues.
That's a hopeful message, especially given the state of the world today. But I'm still curious about the practical side of this model. How do we implement these principles in the real world? Would it require a complete overhaul of our existing political systems?
That's a big question, and there are no easy answers, but the Baha'i writings do offer glimpses into what a future society based on these principles might look like. For example, they envision a world where education is universally accessible and focused on developing both intellectual and spiritual capacities.
So it's not just about acquiring knowledge and skills, but also cultivating qualities like empathy, compassion, and a sense of social responsibility.
Exactly. They also envision a world where the extremes of wealth and poverty are eliminated and everyone has access to the basic necessities of life: food, shelter, healthcare. This would create a more just and equitable society where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
That sounds pretty different from our current economic systems, where inequality seems to be growing wider every day.
It does represent a significant shift. The Baha'i teachings are clear that real progress requires more than just tweaking the edges of our existing systems. It calls for a fundamental transformation of our social, economic, and political structures.
Okay, so we're talking about a long-term vision, a gradual evolution toward a more just and unified world. But what can we do in the meantime? How can we start applying these principles in our own lives and communities today?
That's where the Baha'i teachings get incredibly practical and empowering. They emphasize that real change starts at the grassroots level, with individuals making conscious choices to embody these principles in their daily lives.
All right, give me some examples. What kind of actions can we take to make a real difference?
For starters, we can begin by cultivating those qualities of unity and justice within ourselves. Practice active listening in your conversations. Strive to truly understand the perspectives of others, even when you disagree.
So it's about being the change we want to see in the world.
Exactly. And beyond personal growth, be proactive in your community. Seek out opportunities to engage in dialogue and collaboration with people from diverse backgrounds. This could be participating in interfaith initiatives, volunteering with organizations that promote social justice, or even just having those sometimes difficult conversations with your neighbors about the issues that matter to you.
Those are all great ideas. It seems like a lot of this comes down to building relationships and having those tough conversations, even when it's uncomfortable.
You hit the nail on the head. The Baha'i teachings recognize that building a better world requires courage, compassion, and a willingness to step outside our comfort zones.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. We've explored these complex challenges facing our world, and we've seen how the Baha'i teachings offer a powerful and practical roadmap for navigating these issues. But I can't help but wonder, is this vision of a united and just world truly attainable? Or is it just a utopian dream destined to remain out of reach? I mean, humanity has struggled with these challenges for centuries. Often it feels like we're moving further away from unity, not closer.
That's a very real question, and one that the Baha'i teachings address head on.
Yeah.
They don't shy away from the immense challenges we face, the deeply ingrained prejudices and divisive forces that threaten to tear us apart. But they also offer a profound message of hope, rooted in the belief that humanity is capable of transcending these limitations and achieving a level of unity and justice we've never seen before.
So it's not going to be easy, but it's not impossible either.
Exactly. The Baha'i teachings compare this process of social transformation to the evolution of an individual soul. Just as an individual goes through stages of growth and development, overcoming challenges and refining their character over time, so too can humanity as a whole evolve toward a state of greater maturity, wisdom, and unity.
That's a really beautiful analogy, but what makes them so confident that this transformation is actually possible? What gives them that hope?
Well, they point to the undeniable progress humanity has already made. Think about the abolition of slavery, the expansion of human rights, and the advancements in science and technology that have improved countless lives.
Right.
These are all testaments to our capacity to evolve, to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles, and to create a better world.
Okay, so we have a track record of progress, even if it's been slow and often painful. What else fuels their optimism?
The Baha'i teachings also emphasize the power of divine assistance. They believe that God is not just a distant observer, but an active force in human affairs, guiding us toward our ultimate destiny of unity and peace.
So we're not alone in this struggle. There's a higher power working alongside us.
Exactly. The Baha'i writings are full of assurances that God is working through individuals and institutions to bring about this transformation, even when we can't see it happening in the moment.
That's a comforting thought, especially when we're bombarded with so much negativity and despair in the world today. But it's important to remember that this belief in divine assistance isn't a passive thing.
You're absolutely right. It's not about sitting back and waiting for God to fix everything. It's a call to action, a reminder that we have a vital role to play in this unfolding drama of human progress, that our choices and actions matter, and that we can contribute to building a better world for ourselves and future generations.
So it's about combining our efforts with faith, that a greater power is guiding us toward our ultimate destiny.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and that combination of effort and faith can inspire us to persevere even when faced with the most daunting challenges. Each of us has a responsibility to model the behavior we want to see online, to engage in respectful dialogue, challenge misinformation, and promote understanding and unity.
So it's about being the change we want to see in the digital world, just like we were talking about earlier, with real-world action.
Exactly, and the Baha'i teachings also emphasize the importance of collective action. We can work together to advocate for ethical guidelines for social media platforms, to promote media literacy education, and to create online spaces that foster constructive dialogue and respectful engagement.
It sounds like a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Personal responsibility combined with systemic change. But honestly, sometimes it feels like we're shouting into the void, like those in power aren't listening.
I understand that feeling. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenges we face in the digital age. But the Baha'i teachings remind us that even small acts of kindness and understanding can have a ripple effect. Never underestimate the power of your individual choices and actions to create positive change.
That's a good point. Sometimes we focus so much on the big picture that we forget about the power of those everyday interactions. Speaking of interconnectedness, what are your thoughts on fostering intergenerational understanding and collaboration? It seems like there's a growing divide between generations, especially with technology playing such a huge role in shaping young people's lives.
You're absolutely right. The challenges of fostering intergenerational understanding and collaboration are more pressing than ever. The Baha'i teachings offer a unique perspective on this, rooted in the principle of the oneness of humanity and a deep appreciation for the interconnectedness of all generations.
Okay, I'm curious, how does this perspective translate into practical approaches for bridging the generational divide?
One of the key insights from the Baha'i writings is the recognition that each generation brings its own unique strengths and perspectives to the table.
Okay.
The older generation carries the wisdom of experience, the accumulated knowledge and insights gained over a lifetime of navigating the complexities of life. The younger generation, on the other hand, brings fresh energy, innovative ideas, and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
So it's not about one generation being superior to the other, but about recognizing the value of their complementary contributions. Like each generation has something unique to offer, and we need each other to create a truly thriving society.
Exactly. The Baha'i teachings encourage us to see each generation as holding a piece of the puzzle, and it's only through collaboration and mutual respect that we can create a complete picture.
That's a beautiful analogy, but how do we actually cultivate that kind of collaboration in a world where generational divides often seem so entrenched, it often feels like we're speaking different languages?
You're right. Communication is key. The Baha'i teachings emphasize the importance of creating spaces for meaningful dialogue and interaction between generations.
Okay.
This could involve intergenerational community projects, mentoring programs, or even just regular family gatherings where different age groups can share their perspectives and learn from each other.
So it's about creating opportunities for genuine connection and understanding, rather than just talking at each other or making assumptions about the other generation's values and priorities.
Exactly. And this requires a willingness to listen deeply to the concerns and aspirations of each generation, to acknowledge their differences, but also to seek out that common ground and those shared goals that unite us.
I can see how that shift in perspective is crucial, but what about the specific challenges that each generation faces? I mean, the world has changed so much in recent decades, and it feels like younger generations are facing a whole different set of pressures and uncertainties than their parents or grandparents ever did. How do we even begin to understand each other's realities when they feel so different?
You're absolutely right. The Baha'i teachings acknowledge the rapid pace of change in the modern world and the unique challenges that each generation faces, but they also emphasize that certain fundamental human values and principles remain constant across time and cultures.
Okay, so amidst all the change and uncertainty, there are still some bedrock principles that we all share. What are some of those enduring values that can help bridge the gap between generations?
Well, think about values like honesty, integrity, compassion, justice, and the importance of serving the common good. These are principles that have resonated with people throughout history, regardless of their generation or background, and these shared values can serve as a foundation for building bridges of understanding and collaboration across generations.
It's reassuring to think that even as the world changes so rapidly, there's still a common ground that unites us all. It makes the task of building bridges between generations seem less daunting. But how do we actually bridge the gap between the wisdom of experience and the dynamism of youth? It feels like there's often a tension between tradition and innovation, between holding on to the past and embracing the future. How do we reconcile those seemingly opposite forces?
You've hit on a key tension that exists in all societies, but the Baha'i teachings offer a unique perspective on this dynamic. They believe that true progress requires a balance of both preservation and transformation.
Okay.
It's about honoring the wisdom and traditions of the past while also being open to new ideas and approaches that can address the evolving challenges of the present.
So it's not about one generation dictating to the other, but about finding a way to blend the best of both worlds, to honor the past while embracing the future.
Exactly. The Baha'i writings often use the analogy of a tree to describe this process. The roots represent the enduring principles and values that have sustained humanity throughout history, while the branches represent the new growth and adaptation that's necessary for us to thrive in a changing world.
I love that analogy. It suggests that growth and stability aren't mutually exclusive, but rather complementary aspects of a healthy and vibrant organism, and that same principle can be applied to the relationship between generations, right? We need both the grounding wisdom of experience and the fresh perspectives of youth to truly thrive.
Precisely, and this perspective can be incredibly helpful in navigating the challenges of intergenerational collaboration. It encourages us to approach these conversations with a spirit of mutual respect, recognizing that each generation has something valuable to offer, and that it's through the synergy of these contributions that we can create a brighter future for all.
This has been such an insightful exploration of the Baha'i perspective on fostering intergenerational understanding and collaboration. It's a vision that challenges us to see beyond our differences, to appreciate the unique contributions of each generation, and to work together to create a world that honors both the wisdom of the past and the promise of the future. And as we wrap up our deep dive today, I think it's fitting to leave our listener with a final thought from Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, who so beautifully captured this vision of unity. The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens.
That's a powerful reminder that despite all our differences, we are all interconnected and share a common destiny on this planet. And it's a call to action, to work together to create a world where all generations can thrive in peace, harmony, and mutual respect.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration. We hope this deep dive has provided you with some new insights and inspiration as you continue to navigate these complex and challenging issues. Remember, even small acts of kindness, understanding, and collaboration can make a difference. And as we work together to build a more just, unified, and sustainable world, let's never forget the words of Baha'u'llah: the earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens.